Hey, Josh, Ruben, thanks so much for taking the time and joining
man.
us today, man.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, so let me start by saying you were one of the funniest motherfuckers that I have seen lately.
Oh my
I've been watching your reels on Instagram, and there's
goodness.
like a weird improv game show that you've been posting from that I think that is like a skit kind of thing. But there's
Make
one
some noise.
Yeah,
Game
there's-
changer.
Yeah, there's one in particular where the challenge is two mafia bosses competing against each other to order dinner. I laughed over that for like 6 hours. Like I would laugh until I couldn't breathe and forget what I was laughing about, and then I'd remember it, and the whole thing would start over again.
Then he had to be carted off to the hospital shortly after, I believe.
Yeah, well done is all I have to say.
Thank you.
for
Yeah,
sure.
Dropout is make some noise. I do that with my buddy Sam Bryce, who I've known since I was in summer camp. I met him at summer camp and noticed I was a teenager, and it's one of the few things I can talk about as a union member on strike because it's not struck. So we were like,
cool.
all these clips, as SAG members, and all of us were sidebarring like, oh shit, we can't share these amazing clips, and people really need to laugh right now. But it could be more of an independent endeavor, and it's one of the few great employers in our little community. And one of the things I still love to do, it's like I love being a genre filmmaker and actor, but also hopping into making people laugh for 6 hours, if that, and sharing ridiculous shit, because it amasses my audience. And then every once in a while I share them on some like genre thing that I did. Like I played a serial killer in something last year. And then for suddenly to, show a clip from that for people to go like, whoa, wait, what? You're the funny noise boy, but you're also doing this.
Right.
They kind of feed each other, these audiences, I think, in a way. As a 40-year-old man growing his audience and hopefully slate of projects after this madness, it's great. And there's, it's I don't know anything else and how to do anything else.
Well, I think that's with the stuff you've done before. I think that's what you do so well is like you're able to blend those really well, those tones between scary and funny, and like you're able to jump from one to the other. And what we have you on today to talk about is your new graphic novel, Darla, which both of us, it was very kind of you guys to share it with us. We both read through the whole thing, had a great time with it. And I was expecting a bit more of that. I'm like, oh, he's going to be like, it's going to be funny and witty. I'm like, oh, this is very dark and very like depressing in a good way. Like, to be honest, I love that kind of tone. It was very dark, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, before we get into the Darla stuff, though, we wanted to talk to you a little bit just generally about the SAG-AFTRA strike and your thoughts on it and your perspective on it, being a union member. My take on it is that obviously something's going to break at some point, right? Like Hollywood cannot exist without actors and writers, period. Like the studios are not just magically producing content. There's people that are producing that content for them.
Yeah.
So obviously something's got to break at some point. Do you think it's sooner or later? What do you think the temperature of it is at this point?
I mean, I thought when the WGA went on strike, I was like, oh, this is going to go for 2 weeks. This is only going to last for 2 weeks. Then when they hit, 80 some odd days, 90 some odd days, 80 some odd, and the actors joined, I went, oh, now it's over. They're not, with Barbenheimer, they're not going to allow this thing to go on for more than a week, because in I want to say it was 1960 when the last time this happened, when both unions were on strike, they begged the actors back to the table after a week, and out of that came the residuals checks, which is how we've all sort of since survived. The fact that we're in, I don't know, day 25 plus now with actors and 100 plus for WGA, it's scary. And, there were some folks who were like, telling you it's January. I'm telling you it's January. And I'm kind of hopeful now that the actors are on strike in a weird way. It's like, okay, there's no way they're gonna pause now. The fact that they can't make Batman 2 and Barbie 2 and et cetera and et cetera. Come on, that's like how these guys make money. And someone made a really good point. There are many people who are more articulate about this than I am, but there's probably so much infighting. I think it was Seth Rogen who said it recently. There's so much infighting with these studios and technically with what these are tech companies that kind of do the movie thing as a hobby, that it's very unlikely they're going to come to an agreement sooner than later because their priorities are different.
Sure.
Paramount's priority is different than Sony's, is different than Apple's, is different than Amazon's, and Netflix is a whole other thing.
And then there's the real big bad Disney, who like gives zero fucks about anyone.
Well, I have to say, I don't think Well, I'll say this, there's the executives, like the development folks get lumped into, these producers get lumped into being like bad folks when they're actually largely just movie lovers where this shit's kind of out of their control. Some of them are my dear friends. They're the ones who are with us, like with us filmmakers on the ground who fly to our locations to give us their thoughts. And sometimes it's annoying and usually it's helpful, whatever. And they're the ones who help bring the thing to, fruition. It's the Igers and the folk.
I was gonna say, let me rephrase and just say Bob Iger, not Disney.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean he's one. I mean they're also they're out of touch. They're out of touch. I don't even know if they're really in the boardroom. So there's gonna come a point where no one's gonna get what they want, but it's gonna be better, and hopefully it will have to do with some form of transparency in the sharing of data. Usually, like in the not too distant past, you know what your fucking numbers were for your TV show or you definitely know for your film, you know what the receipts are for Barbie, but you don't necessarily know what it is for your show on Netflix because they won't tell you, or they'll say, oh yeah, it's the 5th most streamed whatever, and you'd be able to accurately see what percentage of that you're owed. They're not doing that now, and people are losing their homes and are having to drive for Uber and Lyft and are having to move into second careers when they should be focusing on creating the very fabric of our culture, builds community and industry. And so my thought on it is, to make a long point longer, and other people have articulated it better than as is, the as Fran Drescher said, like the walls of Versailles are going to fall eventually, and the longer they want to hold back, the longer we hold the line, the stronger we are.
Yeah.
More of these fucking interim agreements that go through, the better, because they fall behind, and these projects that get made can proceed, and people can work, and they can get left in the dust, and it might actually pave the way for a brand new form of distribution, brand new company. A lot of us are talking. There's a lot of energy about a new system.
Hell yeah.
That'd be excellent. Little did they know that Fran Drescher actually delivered those words from horseback while holding a sword.
Yeah, exactly. Truly. We all kind of were like, Anne's going to be the knight, and she is.
She is.
Really delivering. We're proud.
Well, I saw a really good interview with Sean Gunn, James Gunn's brother.
Yeah.
Where he kind of broke it down for people, where he was like, I was on a show called Gilmore Girls for years, and I could track the residuals from that show when it was just in syndication on TV, and then Netflix bought it, and all of a sudden there were no metrics for my residuals from that. And he was like, I'm not greedy. I just feel like I did this work. I signed a contract initially saying I would get residuals for this, and somehow that's not being honored because now it's gone streaming. And like, from an everyman perspective, that makes so much sense to me, that like, dude, you did work. You deserve to get compensated for said work. And I wonder how much of the general public understands that, like, right? Because we have this sort of cult of celebrity and cult of personality that exists for anybody that's in the entertainment industry. And I wonder how much of the general public really realizes that it's work. It's not just I'm doing what I love because I love making art. This is a fucking career.
Oh, yeah. It's a fucking career, and it's actually pretty blue collar. There's not a lot of us qualify for our health insurance. Last year, I had to, my wife and I were off health insurance for about 6 months. She was paying like the big monthly cost for or whatever, $600 fucking plus dollars a month. And I lost my DGA insurance because the residuals were waning from stuff I'd done from things like Death to 2021 for Netflix. And I'd gotten the bulk of my Werewolves ones. Werewolves Within came out during COVID. So we had just a few weeks in theaters, so it was okay residuals wise, but it waned.
That was one of the few movies I saw during COVID.
Yeah,
that was
same.
actually
same.
Yeah, same. It was like Invisible Man and
yes,
and Zola
and Godzilla versus Kong, right?
Yeah,
like that was it.
That brought me home. Yep.
Yeah, and I think Quiet Place 2 was what brought us back to the theater after some time. But I could rather hop from that DG insurance, which had waned, onto SAG because of Dropout, because of these game show things that I've done, because they pay so well and they pay into my pension. And the fact that I squeezed through and was one of the lucky few to qualify, having done like an indie. So I'm one of the lucky few who, but truly like a working class actor creator who, if I'm not directing, I'm writing. And if I'm not writing, where I make the least money, I'm acting. And I can hop. And next year, we're going to hop back onto, if all goes through, back on my DGA insurance. There's this stuff where we have to like hop from union to union, whatever covers us best. One of the lucky few who at least qualified last year on, or didn't qualify, but never qualified for a new. There's a lot of us that don't qualify and have to get other gigs to make ends meet, and it's scary. We should be. The precedent was set some time ago. Even though we strike every few years, we should be able to make a living.
Yeah.
Entertaining people. It's the most, one of the more noble businesses that builds community, provides escapism. Lets folks let off steam in the dark, and dress up like our favorite characters for Halloween, and build our kids' imaginations.
Well, and if you told me 10 years ago that Starbucks and Hollywood was going to be leading the labor movement, like, I would have thought you were fucking crazy. But like, what to that point, I think it's kind of awesome that labor stuff is becoming so much more hard hitting, because it's Hollywood, it's Starbucks, it's not some abstract nebulous entity, right? It's the people.
It's everything too, by the way. UPS workers,
yep, and Amazon.
Massive win, as they should. After the exploitation of labor, this is everyone. It's not just us. It's everyone. We're all feeling it with the cost of eggs at the market and whatnot. But the fact that we can't keep up, and that houses are what they are, and we can't live where we have to or are required to work in cases, etc. Eventually the walls will fall.
We just saw Disney's animators unionize, right?
Marvel, man, yeah. And Marvel, people being the most exploited and the most damn right thing. I think these will too.
I wonder how much of that with Marvel, because I feel like Kevin Feige's a good dude, and I feel like he really cares about the content and the creators to whatever extent he can. I wonder how much of the exploitation there is because Marvel is owned by the big one, right? And like
the mouse.
The mouse. I don't know. Either way, like,
it's beyond my purview.
Like, I'm not in the industry on that level, so like, I'm not even gonna offer supposition on it. But I am so stoked that it's happening in my lifetime, that I get to see this sort of paradigm shift of labor. And I think even before this happened, when the pandemic happened and we were all forced into our houses for 2.5 years, I think that there was a baseline of trauma that everyone experienced, and there was a baseline of empathy that was grown from that. And I think you're seeing a lot of that in people being more willing to support these labor movements, right? You're seeing people that are like, everybody, like you said, like, the price of eggs is going up. And maybe we gained some empathy from lockdown, that we can all sort of be like, wow, we are all on the same boat. Maybe we should be supporting each other.
Well, the other thing that happened during COVID is that we all bought and escaped into the things that we love. Look how hard media came back so intensely. I didn't give a fuck what a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray was. Now it's all I can think about.
How can I make it clearer?
Like 3D.
How can I bind more and lean in more and hold the stuff close that allows me to escape? And it's entertainment. It's everything from poetry and Stephen King and other great writers to all the films and TV shows that we love, and who provided that escapism. As just one of many examples, when UPS workers were still out there, when restaurant workers and hotel workers and everything were still helping folks out and shelter us and all that good stuff. So there'll be blood in the water in a good way after this stuff is at least solved.
Hell yeah, I like that. I like it phrased that way. There'll be blood in the water in a good way. I'm here for that.
Because there's gonna be people are gonna be starved for stuff, and right now stuff like while I'm talking to you, it's like the stuff I can do right now if I'm not writing screenplays for myself is I can write all the comic books I want,
Hell yes.
prep all the plays I want, if that's something I could theoretically get into, just to keep going,
Yeah.
Well,
Find other avenues,
well,
right?
let's talk about Darla, but right before that, you're a hometown guy to where we're from. You're from DC, right?
You're a DC guy?
I was born,
in
DC.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born in DC. I grew up in Potomac, Maryland.
Yeah, we're in Frederick.
Wow,
Yeah,
crazy.
so we're just north of there.
That's crazy. Yeah, I went to Wayside Elementary, the Burns School, and had a temper tantrum at some private school that Sidwell Friends.
Yeah, that sounds right. That's where we all had temper tantrums.
So I think my mom actually taught art at Wayside back in the 80s. Yeah.
So she would have known Mrs. Kramer.
Yeah.
I'll be like, wow, damn.
That's quite.
Yeah, it was a great place to grow up because it was like everything I loved about my horror upbringing was in those sort of cul-de-sacs. And I lived in a neighborhood called Bonnydale, which I think is going to be such a great name for a movie someday, hopefully. Where it was like at the end of a cul-de-sac, you walk through the woods, and then there's a tennis court in a clearing. Like there was just shit like that in those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
There was, like a field of telephone poles that would just go on, just kind of, you'd go home and watch Twilight Zone, Tales from the Dark Side.
Right.
Go, or,
or even like Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, right? They're on those suburban streets.
Yeah.
And then also that was the time period, too, where we're all being told about, like, we got serial killers and white vans. And where do they prey on people? They go to these neighborhoods like this. So all of a sudden, these places like tennis courts and cul-de-sacs that are supposed to be safe now have this, like, eerie kind of undertone to them.
Well, the weird dichotomy there, though, is like, it was the time where we were all, like, the satanic panic was happening and everybody was totally concerned about abduction.
Oh, yeah.
And also, that was the time where your parents would be like, go outside and don't come back until the lights come on. And it's like, I have a 9-month-old daughter now, and I would, I think about what I'm going to be like when she's a toddler, and I'm like, there's no scenario where I'm like, go play by yourself for 8 hours.
There's a key hidden under a rock. What else do you want?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. We're constantly debate about bringing children into a world where people are just like constantly, Michael Douglasing. It's just so scary. And then you look at a place like Maui, like, oh God bless and God forbid, those poor folks, like climate and murder, and we're just like, oh my God, but what a great time to do genre,
Yeah. Well, we've said this before, dude. When things in life and the world around us go down, the art sort of just goes on up. People got to respond to it somehow. You got to deal with it somehow.
Yeah,
that's right. Someone phrased it really well. It's like, horror. It's a sort of a survival practice. You go in and you watch people survive the impossible 90% of the time, and come out covered in blood and still living on the other end of it. And that's why it's so cathartic. It's why we love it.
Well, it's also very reflective of whatever's happening at the time, right? Like horror has always been a way for us to confront the worst things that are going on.
Yeah, process it a little bit.
With some sort of suspension of disbelief, but there's still that part of you that's like, this is based in reality on some level.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Darla, man.
Yeah. So this is your graphic novel. Have you done graphic novels before? I see it hanging up back there.
I hadn't done graphic novels before, but I read a shit ton of comics as a kid. Put them down for a long time. I came back. I came back with a roar when my buddy Charlie McQuaid insisted I buy Preacher. Great name.
Oh my God, Preacher.
Ennis's Preacher. So I tore through all 10, 12 issues of that. And then in recent years, I only thought about it again because I think comics kind of in a weird way blew up on Twitter or Zitter or Shitter or whatever it is now. It's been neat. And a couple artists, including Bree Tippett, who's an artist from Alabama, now in Vegas. She would just tag me in fan art for my films. And I was like, oh my God, what a Charles Burns-esque kind of creepy, gruesome, charming combination style you have. What a visionary you kind of are.
Yeah.
And kept tagging me and stuff and sharing me, with her art. And then I looked into her art and she sent me one of her books. And I was like, okay, I have to collaborate with you. And she's like, well, I'm not much of a writer. I'll do all the drawing if you want to write something. So it's like, do we come up with something originally or whatever? So originally the plan was, let's just make a book and put it on like Etsy. Let's make it super indie. And I'm still kind of all about that. I just want to make something to get out immediately. I have my Scare Me screenplays out, and T-shirts and stickers. I like putting stuff directly out, so you don't have to cut out the middlemen. And so I gave her this screenplay. Originally, this was a movie, sort of inspired by, all of the inspos, Babadook, A Dead Zone, even a little Requiem for a Dream. So it's bleak. And I thought, well, your more charming, gruesome sort of style will serve this tragic story really well.
Yeah.
And she read it and she loved it. She started drawing these kind of like early interpretations, even like inspirations, imagery I'd used for the director's deck, which included everything Melissa Leo from Prisoners to Ellen Burstyn and Requiem for a Dream, etc. And she just found a visual language for it, and I basically gave her the script, and I said, do whatever. So interpret it, just transcribe it. And that's what I realized very quickly was that's not the way to write comic books. I'm now going back and learning McCloud and like learning how I actually do it. Because the first version of it, God Bless Bree, was choked with text. Usually you hire a letterer and a colorist after you draw the whole thing, and she hand drew everything and lettered every bit of text.
Oh,
Wow.
And was working like lightning fast. That's just how much of a talent she is. And then I gave it to my publisher, which we weren't going to go with a publisher, Invader Comics, and my buddy Mike Perkins was like, this is riddled with text. This is a visual meat. You're going to have to cut like half of this dialogue out and just let the pictures do their thing. And so that was the learning curve for me.
Sure.
But now, especially with kind of in the middle of the strike and also just getting back into comics in a big way and horror comics, I'm so obsessed with it. I already have a couple ideas and properly formatted shit I'm trying to get through, and regardless of whether or not we get back to it sooner than later directing.
Well, I love that it wears its like EC Comics influences on its sleeve, right? Where you have the fake full page ads for whatever you can send in to get your the classic, the X-ray specs or whatever they might be.
I also picked up a really heavy American Splendor, like Harvey Pekar vibe from it. Like the art itself is very reminiscent of American Splendor to me, and like just sort of I don't know how to say it otherwise, sort of just the scratchy nature of the art itself, which conveys almost a heightened sense of reality to it, the same way American Splendor did, the same way objectively American Splendor was not a great comic, but it was because it was like an everyman kind of thing, like everybody could relate to Harvey Pekar. And in the same way, I think as bleak and as out there of a character as Darla is, she's also very relatable.
Sure.
It is very like, wow, man, there but for the grace go I, and like all it takes is one wrong prescription. Like
Yeah, or just to have your groundwater poisoned with mercury.
Yeah. Like, and what that will do to a person who may already likely very much was inherently not a good person. I mean, actually, you know that by looking at her daughter's messed up eye. She wasn't good back then, and she's, the circumstances aren't making her great now. But it's also like, kind of about, I guess, any great comic. I'm kind of learning, reading a bunch and listening to some interviews and such about the making of them is you have to write how people talk, and you have to kind of write angry. Otherwise, you're just writing cool and drawing. A lot of comics is like, some folks who I've done reading or done signings in some stores here in California, and the amazing people that work there, these comic book freaks that companies like Pulp Fiction and Revenge of are amazing stores here in LA will be like, a lot of comics are pretty mid because a lot of the illustrators just want to draw cool shit, and then they figure out the story later. But it's exciting to think about, if you can write like James Tinian, I think that's his name, who did Nice House on the Lake, which is one of my most favorite things I've read recently. It's a phenomenal book. I think he just won the Eisner for it. Then you can really like, hit people in the gut. And that's the
Sure.
kind of hope dream, is that, you can write with intention. You can write someone who's a real person, surround her with supernatural circumstance, and then hopefully people just kind of are like, oh shit, I can't put this down. Now it's under my skin.
There's something about comics too that I think allow you some freedom in other ways that like maybe films wouldn't. Where like, for instance, this is a graphic novel that's led by an unlikable elderly woman. Would Hollywood let you do this?
maybe Ari Aster, but after
Sure.
Beau is Afraid, I don't know. Like you need. Like, I think about that. If someone wanted to adapt this someday, it has to go to a visionary.
Yeah.
Who's going to make the world as ridiculous as like Beau is Afraid was. It has to be almost farcically a 90s film in that way,
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you mentioned Requiem, there being an element of Requiem in there, and like, the mom in Requiem is arguably one of the most unlikable characters in that film, even though she's supposed to be sympathetic. Like the whole time you're like, why are you such a doormat?
Well,
like,
and there's something that's so like it's like a cognitive dissonance almost as like a reader, because you're familiar with characters like these and you start reading them and you're like, okay, we're about to experience a redemption arc or something like that. You're like, all right, I feel like I know where this goes, and then like Requiem or like Darla, it just starts going down, right? And we're just it's out of control and it's speeding up, and you're like not getting what you are hoping for necessarily out of it.
So Bree,
in a good way, if I'm not being clear.
Bree, our operations manager Bree, who I think you were emailing with before us, she and I were reading it at the same time, and we were literally texting each other, and Bree kept texting me like, I don't want to keep reading because I feel like it's just going to take a really bad left turn. I'm so afraid to keep reading this. And I was like, you fucking lean into it. You read it.
It's a very slow bad left turn. You just haven't noticed we've been on it the whole time.
Yep. Until you go back and reread it, and then you're like, oh
yeah, no.
Yes.
I think if I put my name on this as a film, I think people would be like, I'm good. I like the idea of making like Arachnophobia, Tremors, and Clue as opposed to like Todd Solondz films, but this is my swing at a Todd Solondz kind of, horror.
That's fair.
Or like it gave me like a little bit of Willard vibes too.
Yeah.
And certain vibes.
Oh,
I love Willard.
Well, it's very heady, right? And it's very the same way Willard is.
Yeah,
it's
a tragedy, just like Willard.
Yeah, and a lot of Willard is putting yourself in the emotional state of the protagonist. Like, I don't want to call Darla a protagonist, but
yeah,
it's like an anti-protagonist. but a lot of it is putting yourself in that mental state, and it's being reluctantly sympathetic towards her because you're like, this is a terrible person. But like, there's a part of me. Maybe it's because she's old and at the end of her life, but there's a part of me that was like, oh, I kind of do want things to work out for you.
Like, right.
Yeah. There's a cut scene from the book where Dallas sings like the song that bonded them when they were a kid, like to the girl. Not to give anything away. Oops. And it was just one thing that just kind of didn't work, but you could see it in the film. You can just imagine her like that being the sort of maybe emotional levity that comes in the end. It's like, oh, okay, all right. She came back, and there's like a little bit of closure and whatnot. But it's we're like, well, maybe we'll see how this hits people in the gut and gets under their skin.
Yeah.
So do you plan it as a series? Is this the end? Is this just the beginning? What's your plan?
Oh no, this is an evergreen, as my buddy Ed Bader says. This is an evergreen one and done. But I think the next thing I'm working on is a little more kind of fun genre. Probably going to be a 4-series arc, so 4 issues and a little compendium about the size of Darla, and then after that, something that might go longer that I'm really, really excited about. So. Yeah, we'll kind of see. I'm trying to get as much of this stuff written as possible before I go back into production, as we're kind of waiting for our interim agreement something. So
that must be kind of crazy because you're like, I got to write fast because I have no idea when the strike is going to end. I mean, I could write slow, but I should probably write fast.
Well, yeah. I mean, once I figured it out, it's crazy. I met the dude. I'm gonna butcher his name because he's got a weird nickname. He edited all of the Batmans in the 90s. His name is like Gorf. That's his nickname.
Yeah. He's in all
Gordon.
of the DC. Yeah, he's in all of the DC.
Yes.
Any documentary that DC has done in the last like 10 years.
He's like the Batman editor. I ran into him on the picket line at Paramount, and I was like, it was just like just a nice guy. And he's like, "Hi, I'd like to introduce myself to people." And I was like, "Oh," he's like, "Oh, I edited all the Batman. I mentioned every Batman I ever read, and then that was like all I read. That and Spider-Man." It's like, "Oh yeah, I worked on that. I worked on Tales of the Dark Knight, and I worked on this." I was like,
hell yeah,
long and all this shit, edited
so
all
good.
of it, and I said, as a screenwriter, it took me a minute to kind of get my head around the style. I couldn't quite crack it. He goes, "Once you do crack it, you can do it in your sleep and you won't be able to stop." And the reality is, once I figured out how to do it, and it's really not crazy. It's just about really, really being bare bones, descriptive, and not being prescriptive to your artist. It's just like a story in snapshots.
Yep.
Josh is talking with his fingers out like this, and it's a close-up shot. The guys sit there in a 2-shot, staring with their microphones blocking their faces. Like it's like, and you just let the artist interpret if they want to add a Kodak hat or an Amityville shirt or slick back hair or whatever it is. You give them the freedom to do that, as I did kind of with Brie. And now
you
it's
got to
all
do that like when you write too. You have to, not just for actors too. Like you got to let maybe your set designer have some room to like do your work too. Like you got to write in the important stuff, but leave out the fat.
I used to write so prescriptively, and I was like, "Oh no, you want to give people skin in the game. You have to."
There's a great interview with Neil Gaiman where he talks, because Sandman was the first thing he ever did, graphic novel wise, and there's a great interview with him where he talks about he says almost exactly what you just said, that walking into it, he had such a different idea of what writing a comic was, because he was a novelist and he had to basically relearn how to write minimalist,
right,
and how to say as much as possible in as few words as possible.
Because it's like literally every page is a minute, and if you're like write an extra 2 or 3 words that make one line turn into 2 lines, that's significant.
Yeah,
like that is taking up time that you probably don't
That's
need.
labor too.
Yeah, exactly.
That every screenshot or every snapshot of your story is another 2 hours of labor minimum for your artist to go in there, or your colorist. So that's why that's why like the great stories are so great. Like I have this awesome Alex Ross, Flaming Torch versus Namor book, for example, and it's mostly no dialogue. But it's just you could just see the whole story in images, like any great picture book, any great.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly, I'm convinced it's making me a better writer.
Hell yeah.
And I think it'll make me a better director, because you kind of go like, "Oh shit, yeah, we do take things in pictures." Like, you don't want to write any dialogue. Just start describing images. Just start the story, but start drawing, storyboarding it.
It's interesting because that kind of harkens back to Gothic literature versus modern literature, right? Like Gothic literature that existed before like radio and TV, everything was hyper descriptive. Like it would take pages to describe the way a table looked because there were no visual references to stuff, right? So then once radio became a thing and TV became a thing, you could cut corners and say like, "Oh, this was reminiscent of this thing that you've already seen on TV." And with comics, it's like, nah, again, you have to be minimalist and say, I have to trust my artist. Right. And that's why I think like the communication between the writer and the artist is so important.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I've never heard that. It's like that you develop like a cultural shorthand.
I took a whole I'm a literature major, and I took a whole class on the difference between Gothic and modern literature and how like TV basically killed literature in a way. I don't think it killed it exactly. It just paradigm shifted it. But a lot of people see.
But that kind of like elongated poetic prose, really.
Yep.
Because of that, like Tolkien, people don't write like that anymore.
Yeah. Or like Lovecraft is a great example of someone that what made Lovecraft great was that he was super descriptive, but also as vague as humanly possible, right?
Yeah.
So like
so impactful.
Yeah, like he would spend pages describing someone's mental state as a result of whatever was happening to them, but he would describe nothing about what was happening to them.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you do that? And I think that's one of the reasons that you see a lot of modern horror, and specifically modern graphic novel horror, based on Lovecraft themes, right? Because it's so open for interpretation. And so like, well, we know there's a slimy tentacle in there somewhere, but like, we don't know what it's attached to.
Yeah.
What else has influenced you? And it doesn't necessarily need to be comic book wise, but what else has influenced you, maybe visually, that then you translated via writing? I'm curious, because I really like, now that you've mentioned Preacher and now that I've read Darla, like I'm fascinated by how it comes from here to the writing.
Well, again, Darla was such a backdoor approach that I wouldn't quite do the same again. I can tell you that, like, I gave Bree, I gave my artist what is basically the document I do for every project. Doesn't matter what it is. If this agreement goes through for this next thing I'm doing, I'm going to get back into a project that's actually has no heart to it. That's sort of it's out and out comedy, but it's going to feel a little bit more like Knives Out, for example.
Okay.
So it's going to have a bit of that feel, but it's unmistakably like a comedy. And with something like that, or even something like with Darla, I will do what's called like a director deck or a crew book, a crew Bible, where I'll welcome you to my shoot and I'll say, here's all the inspiration visually. Here's some costume stuff. I wanted to feel like this, like with werewolves. I was like, I want this guy Parker to be like an older Bruce Wayne, and here's the weapons case I wanted to look like from Dark Knight, and here's the color palette, everything. So with Darla, I gave Bree this booklet that had images of Margot Martindale from Manchester by the Sea and Melissa Leo holding a gun and prisoners, and and some Terry Crutzen.
Yeah.
And some images from some indie films. I don't even quite remember, like obscure ones that like John Slattery's in there to replicate the Vern character.
Sure.
And then images from everything from, like, again, Shutter Island and Babadook, The Dead Zone. I mean, Martin Sheen as a comp for The Politician, all that shit.
Hell yeah.
That was my approach for the comics here. I think going forward, I'll probably, I'll look at just comics that I love today and am concurrently falling in love with. Nice House on the Lake, just as like how Tinian like lays out his panels is just so genius. It's like, there's like this kind of standard 5 panel per page thing, and he's just like, no, I'm gonna do one long panel that goes across the 2 pages and then fragment it with 16 panels on the bottom, fragments of reactions and eyes and this, that, and because it's art, and there's no, what I love about it is if it's a good book, it's a good book. You guys could put something out that just hits you in the heart, self-publish it. And if it's good, just like an indie, people are going to see it. And that's why I'm so fucking excited about this as a medium. So, I mean, I'm sort of still learning. I mean, the comics that I grew up loving were, God, I always butcher this name. I think it was Tales of the Dark Knight or Tales of the Demon Knight, but it was the Raj Al Ghul Batman book.
Tales of the Demon Knight. That is one of the best runs in Batman history. Like, it is.
The cowl, no shirt, and like in the desert, and also like Batman Year 2, and he just has a gun.
Yep.
Like, he's just going after the Reaper. Like, that was like...
Well, Tales of the Demon Knight specifically, when that was put out, that was unheard of to go that dark. And, I'm not a huge DC fan. I'm more a Marvel fan. Just because there's a little kid inside me that like wants the hero to always be good. But what I do appreciate about DC is that DC has never been afraid to go places that you don't expect them to. And, I think Batman in particular got real formulaic throughout the 70s and 80s. And in the 90s, when they started bringing new blood in, like when everybody left Marvel and Jim Lee came to DC, I think in the late 90s, you saw this shift happen in DC where they were like Vertigo became a thing, which was like a subsidiary of DC to specifically make dark shit. And yeah, Tales of the Demon Knight were amazing.
Yeah, it's good. It's really, really good stuff. I don't know. I'm still discovering stuff. I just bought a run of like Ash and Darkman versus the Evil Dead. Like, because Darkman, Darkman is like my white whale. I want to bring Darkman back to film.
Oh, cool.
Oh my God, do that.
Cool.
Yeah. I definitely have had some conversations with Raimi and his folks and the whole thing.
Sure.
I think the goal basically would be maybe to push that one over the hill is to do something really scary and something that homages it with and maybe action forward in one of my next films.
Sure.
One of which that might be a good comp is Green Bank, a feature I'm attached to that hopefully will go after the strike that was announced. So, but yeah, I mean, it's that one is Darkman is scary Batman. Like that's why.
Yeah, well, it's Batman without a sense of moral justice,
Moral
right?
superiority.
Like, when you could argue that Batman himself is a fascist and has no real moral compass, but like Darkman is the reality of that, right? Like Darkman is what that would actually look like.
If you had no one and you were going mad underground, and you could only go out for 90 minutes at a time before your fake skin melted, revealing your Freddy Krueger face. Like, some version of superhuman strength, but you weren't a perfect fighter. It's like there's so much great about it.
When it's such an underrated film, and I feel like whenever I hear someone refer to Darkman as a cult classic, I just want to slap the taste out of their mouth because I'm like, no, dude.
I feel like it is.
When I was a teenager and that movie came out, there was nothing cult about it. It was a dark action film that me and my friends were like didn't even know we needed until we had it.
It did well too. It made a lot of money. It just sucks that not a lot of people quite recall it. But I dunk up social media so much with my fandom of it that hopefully people will rediscover and get stoked on it again.
Well, that's the kind of stuff that's like juicy to remake, right? Because like who cares about remaking something that's already currently popular and like taking over the zeitgeist? It's way more fun to bring back something that people are like, you know what? I did love that. And
we need a remake of Hackers right now.
That'd just be like someone just pushes one button. I mean,
it wouldn't be anywhere near as interesting as the 1995 version.
Yeah, push one button, they sit back and get high.
Well, what always got me about the 1995 version of that is all of the montages of them hacking in the movie, like that shouldn't be enjoyable to watch because it's literally just someone like typing intensely. But somehow it works.
There's a whole like 20 years of cinema and TV where they have to figure out the most interesting way to show people do shit on computers.
Now it's just like somebody sends a text.
It's like what's the every time there's like a character on one of the CSI shows who's like their whole job is to like sit on a computer
to be the guy
and,
in
like,
the chair.
They have to be like all dressed in vivid colors, or they're like super goth, or they're like something's crazy about them.
They got to be Mr. Robot.
Right, because dude, Mr. Robot's a great example because that unless that character is severely mentally ill, no one gives a shit about what that character's doing. You hacked a major corporation. Great. Oh, you're also a paranoid schizophrenic.
Now we're just in the era of making smartphones and text messaging everybody visually appealing.
Well, that's why like the Mission Impossible films like have had to get so much heavier drama-wise, right? Because like we're so far beyond the pale in terms of using technology for espionage that it's like there needs to be a serious dramatic.
Let's crash a train.
Right. Can we get more Tom Cruise running? Is that a thing? Is there too much yet?
What if he ran faster though?
He's gonna die on set eventually doing that.
I think he's unkillable. Frankly.
I think he
he's
might
like,
be.
He's like, I'm gonna do this. If Harrison Ford's 80 now, I'm gonna do this till I'm 80. I'm like, okay. Like you were so good, in Magnolia. Like I'd love to see him go back to drama,
right?
Or I don't think he's doing that.
Or the opposite end of that spectrum. His character in Tropic Thunder, he plays the weird, fat, sweaty movie producer. Like
what's the
brilliant?
What's the Statham movie where if he slows down he dies or whatever? So I have a theory that Tom Cruise may be living out a Crank-like scenario, in which he cannot slow down or he may die.
He is a human iteration of the bus from Speed. Is what he is. Keanu Reeves is driving this from behind the scenes. I know it.
So that's
there are really surreal videos of him just sitting down on a couch with a tub of popcorn with giant muscles, and he's like, "I love my popcorn." I'm like,
"Do you?
Is this in between like?" jumping from building to building and breaking your leg.
I was going to say, cut 2 minutes later where he's just purging all of the popcorn immediately. See, when you say that to me, though, I imagine in my head him going full Oprah appearance and like jumping up and down on the couch about how much he loves popcorn.
Thanu is okay with popcorn, okay? Thanu is all right with that.
Every kernel you eat releases a thetan.
Yeah, it's good for you. It's good for you. So, Josh, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Where and when can people find Darla on the shelf?
It's in comic book stores now, and if it is not, excuse me, if Darla is not in your comic store, you can walk in and ask them to order it for you. It's on Diamond in previews and all that good stuff. Say on Josh Ruben's Darla. But it's out. It's in stores. You can order on my website as well, josh'smindhouse.com. And may it thoroughly twist your day.
It will. We enjoyed it thoroughly. I think you guys will as well. So go out and pick up Josh Ruben's new graphic novel, Darla. It's awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. This was a ton of fun, man. Thank you for taking the time.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Right, see ya.